How much have your efforts to combat climate change in Congress been affected by the Trump administration, by Scott Pruitt's tenure as the chief of the EPA and the numerous rollbacks of Obama-era regulations and environmental policies, including the Clean Power Plan that set limits on emissions? With those changes, how has that affected your efforts with Congress?
I'm going to say that it's actually minimally affected I haven't had any sense that we're being turned away. In fact, there may even be more of a sense of Republicans quietly, at first, turning in our direction. I can't quantify that.
So you mentioned you haven't seen less interest from lawmakers, especially Republicans,
No.
with the Trump administration.
I can't say that we have. And it's something I have to be very careful to speak to.
You need to remain nonpartisan.
Yes, we do.
To get your policies through, you need to.
We not only need to, but there's a lot of discussion about how important it was or important it is that the health care, the Obamacare Act, was not bipartisan. And now that the recent tax cuts were not bipartisan. We want to change the way people regard fossil fuels, and in order to do that, I think once people start to get a check in the mail every month, they are going to feel like this is a good idea. But in order for that to go into place in a satisfying way, it does have to be bipartisan. Both sides have to be in on it, I think. And we have concerns. An overwhelmingly Democratic Congress is more likely not to be interested in the dividend part of our legislation. They're more likely to be interested in taking that revenue and, from a conservative perspective, growing government, using it for programs. Mm-hmm. And we really want to see it go back to everyone in equal shares.
The Congresswoman has said she supports the principles behind it, but she did voice concerns about costs for the elderly and lower income people, especially those here in the North Country who have to drive distances to get to work and use a lot of fuel.
Yes. It turns out that most of the carbon that is represented in our footprints is in the stuff we buy. It's not in the fuel that goes into our automobiles. That's what we pay for. We go to the pump and we pay for it, so we think of it. But if you think about the food that you eat, a lot of the cost of the food that you eat is the embodied carbon energy that got the food to you, and the embodied carbon energy that ran the tractors and the harvesters, and the embodied fossil fuel energy that created the fertilizer. If you're a rich person and you buy a big boat, there's an enormous amount of embodied carbon energy in the creation of that boat and its materials. And so you're going to put a huge chunk of change in the revenue stream.
But is the concern that the producers would also pass along higher costs?
Oh, they will.
At the fuel pumps, and that people would end up paying there?
Absolutely. No, that's, and we actually, if we want people to stop using so much gasoline, then the fuel needs to be more expensive. It's an unfortunate fact, but the Ford F-150 is now more Ford F-150s are sold than any other vehicle, any other, passenger car. And that reflects the fact that gasoline is low in price. More SUVs are being sold. When fuel is cheap and coal is cheap, it's hard to compete with windmills and solar panels.
Where does it stand right now as far as support from Republicans and Democrats? Do you think you are in a position that you're going to get the votes needed to pass it?
Where we are now is there is a draft of the legislation that's been approved by the Office of Legislative Counsel. So that means that it conforms to law. It's a legitimate thing. Now we need somebody to introduce it. And You know, there's been a lot of input from Republicans about what the bill should be, but we have to get it across the finish line. We have to get, if Elise Stefanik was to introduce it, she has to have the sense that there's support for that in her district. It's, you know, I mean, she's bucking the leadership of her party enormously if she is to do that. So she has to know that we in the district support her doing that.